Welcome to Debt Free in 30, where every week we take 30 minutes and talk to industry experts about debt, money, and personal finance. I'm Doug Hoyes. This show is called Debt Free in 30, and as that title would indicate, our main objective here is to help our listeners find ways to get out of debt. But how do you actually do that? What practical strategies are there for becoming debt-free? What practical, real-life steps can you take if you have a debt mess? Fortunately, I have just the person to answer that question. She's written many books on money management, and she has some very definitive opinions on how to clean up a debt mess. So here's my conversation with one of our most popular guests, Gail Vaz-Oxlade, explaining how to clean up your debt mess. I'm joined by Gail Vaz-Oxlade. And Gail, in your book, Money Rules, your rule number 87 is clean up your debt mess. Here's a quote from you. I'm actually going to give your words back to you here. Quote, "Stop whining about being in debt. You had your fun. You made a mess. Now it's time to clean it up. Get busy." So this show is called Debt Free in 30. Give us a quick overview of your basic strategy for cleaning up a debt mess.
Okay, so the first thing you need to do is make a list of all your debt. And you need to order the list from highest interest rate to lowest interest rate. You have to calculate what your minimum payments on each of those debts are so that you know what you have to do to keep them in good standing so you don't end up wrecking your credit score. The next thing you do is you calculate what the payment needs to be out of debt by a certain date. The minimums aren't enough. So if you have a loan, let's say you have a line of credit and you have $12,000 on the line of credit, if you just keep making the interest payment and a small token amount towards the principal, you're going to have that line of credit forever. Instead, what I want you to do is pick a day by when the line of credit will be gone. It might be 12 months from now. It might be 24 months from now. If it's 24 months from now, you will be paying $500 off the principal every month plus your interest cost. So you write all that down. You figure out what that's going to be for each one of your debt. The next step is very important. The next step is the snowballing. Once you have added up all the amounts you have to pay to be out of debt by a certain date, and that date may vary by debt. If you still have a car loan in place and it's for 3 years, that's how long it's going to take. But you're going to set the date for your line of credit. You're going to set the date for your credit cards. What you do is you add up what you are going to have to pay to be out of debt. You'll come up with one lump sum amount, and you are going to apply the minimum payments on everything except your most expensive debt. And by that I mean the callable debt with the highest interest rate. And that's where you're going to put the majority of the money. So doing that, you're going to reduce your interest cost faster.
So an example of a callable debt with a high interest rate would be something like a credit card?
Yes.
A finance company loan?
Yes. Buy now, pay later.
Mm-hmm. A payday loan?
Payday loan is a perfect example. Although usually people who are in the payday loan cycle, what you have to do to get out of that is you have to get yourself another job. You have to work your buns off because you have to get ahead of the payday loan.
Yeah, you're almost toast at that point.
Absolutely.
So you've got this list of all of my debts, and I'm going to start with whatever the highest interest rate one is that's callable. So if I happen to have a very high interest rate mortgage, well, I guess it's either sell the house or live with it. Those are your choices, I guess, right?
What you're going to do is you're going to try and get rid of the callable debt first, because the callable debt is the debt that the bank can demand back without any notice, virtually no notice, 24 hours usually. And so they can come to you and they can say to you, that $12,000 line of credit you have, I want my $12,000 back. And if you can't have it back, they'll immediately send you to collections, which will ruin your credit score completely and make all your other debt more expensive. Or
at the very least, they can jack up the interest rate on that one. So your really low interest rate line of credit that was at 4%, all of a sudden now it's at 10% because they've decided you're a higher risk. That's almost just as bad.
A lot of people don't realize that can happen. I mean, I've gotten quite a few letters from people recently telling me that financial institutions have been raising the interest rates on their lines of credit, and they don't understand why, because the media keeps talking about the fact that we're still in this low interest rate environment, and the Bank of Canada rate hasn't changed. So why is the bank's rate changing? People don't recognize the fact that banks set the interest rates themselves. The Bank of Canada rate is what they get to borrow at. It's not what consumers get to borrow at. And even with people who have good credit scores, sometimes what happens is the money market shrinks. And so banks are having a harder time getting their hands on money. And so what they do is they start taking a harder look at who could potentially be a risk. And if you missed a payment 2 years ago, you're a bigger risk. And so they jack up your interest rate.
And that's what does it. So you got to start with the hard work, which is make the list, sort it out, and then come up with a plan to deal with it.
Absolutely. And it's all outlined in Debt Free Forever. I mean, I have a step-by-step guide. There is no excuse for anyone not being able to do this, because my editor, Kate Cassidy at HarperCollins, she made me put every step in that book with examples. And if you can't afford to buy the book, go to the library.
Yep. Well, we're going to put a link in the show notes to that book, because I agree. That was, of all your books, that's my favorite, because it is very practical, very methodical. It's all right there.
Yes,
great. Thanks very much for this, Gail.
Thanks, Doug.
So there's Gail Vaz-Oxlade's advice on how to deal with a debt mess. Make a list of your debts, order them from highest to lowest, pay off the callable debts with the highest interest rates first, and keep working until you're done. It's hard work and you need a plan, but it's a great strategy to clean up your debt mess. But what if you have a huge amount of debt? In Gail's example, she's talking about paying off your debt over a 2 or 3 year period, but what if your debt is so large that even if you cut your expenses and got a second job, it would still take you 10 years to pay everything off? Then what can you do? There are strategies to deal with that, and that's what we'll talk about right after this quick break. That's coming up next, right here on Debt Free in 30.
You're listening to Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Before the break, we heard Gail Vaz-Oxlade describe how to clean up a debt mess. She gave a lot of great advice, and you can find out more in her book, Debt Free Forever, which I'll link to in the show notes over at hoyes.com. That's HOYES.com. Gail's advice is to make an inventory of your debts, make your minimum payments on all of your debts, and devote all of your extra money to your high-interest, callable debts. That's great advice, but what if your debts are so huge that you can't even make your minimum payments? Here's an example. Let's say that Mary and Joe have decent jobs now, but 2 years ago, Joe's company closed down and Joe was out of work for 6 months and he's not making as much at his new job now. Mary has had some medical issues, so she's had time off work, and she has a lot of expenses for prescriptions and doctor visits related to her medical condition, so they've had to use credit to survive. Their children are growing, but they've also had to borrow some money to help out their kids and to help out their aging parents. As a result, Joe and Mary have over $60,000 in debt between them on credit cards and lines of credit. Joe and Mary are earning about $4,000 a month between them, but from that, they have to pay rent and groceries and transportation and all of their other living expenses. They live pretty frugally, but they're still helping to pay for some of Joe's father's costs at the nursing home he's in, and that only leaves them about $500 per month to put towards their debts. The interest rates on their line of credit and credit cards are fairly reasonable, averaging around 10% on everything, but unfortunately 10% interest on $60,000 in debt works out to about $500 a month just in interest. So Mary and Joe can only afford to pay the interest and nothing more. They'd love to pay off their debts, but they just don't have the money. Mary can't work any more hours due to her medical issues, and Joe keeps looking for a better job, but hasn't found anything yet. They have a real debt mess. What can they do? Well, to answer that question, I've invited back to the show my business partner and Hoyes Michalos co-founder, Ted Michalos. So, Ted, what do you think? Is this situation hopeless for Joe and Mary?
Well, it's never hopeless. It may seem that way to them because they can't see the forest for the trees, but there are solutions. There are things that they can do to get relief from this debt. Before we start exploring with that, I think I want to expand a little more on your scenario. So, $60,000 worth of debt, and the interest every month is $600, but the minimum payments they're expected to make are somewhere between $1,500 and $1,800. So it's not just that they can pay the interest. They probably already are having trouble making the minimum payments on all of this debt, because where's that $1,800 going to come from? They probably put a payment on the Visa card, then take it out again and put it on the MasterCard, and take it out again and put it on the American Express card. So you're right, they're dealing with the interest, but the debt is never going to go down. Well, so what do we got to do? We got to find a way to eliminate the interest and reduce the total amount that they have to pay. The solution I think that comes to mind is something called a consumer proposal. Now, this is a legal procedure where you repay a portion of what you owe. They're becoming much more common and popular in the last few years. In fact, now about half the people that go to see a bankruptcy trustee thinking they have to file bankruptcy they end up filing a consumer proposal instead, because it's a so much better solution.
So let's break it down and go through this kind of step by step. So why is it a better solution than just going bankrupt? They've got all this debt. Why not just go bankrupt, blow it away, and start over? Why are you not recommending that?
Well, so you got to understand how bankruptcy works. The concept behind bankruptcy is you're saying, look, I can't repay any of this $60,000. In exchange for eliminating the $60,000 worth of debt, there are very specific rules for what you have to pay and what we have to deal with. First and foremost, we look at, is there anything that you own that can be turned into cash to go to reduce your debt? So if you have equity in your home, or if you've got mutual funds or savings, if you've got RESPs for your kids, all of these things can be seized to be turned into cash in a bankruptcy. In a consumer proposal, we're not seizing anything. A consumer proposal is literally a deal that you make with your creditors to repay part of what you owe.
Now, Joe and Mary, they don't own anything. They rent. They've got an old car. They don't have any investments. They make $4,000 a month between them. So wouldn't bankruptcy just be a quicker and cheaper option?
Well, and it could be, but the second element of bankruptcy is there's a monthly payment based on family size and income. So I don't want to get too technical, but based on their situation, they've got two people in the household, $4,000 coming in. Their bankruptcy payment would probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of $750 a month. It would run for 21 months, so bankruptcy is going to cost them between $15,000 to $20,000.
And if you want to find more about what Ted's talking about, you can go to our website and do a search for surplus income. That's the concept that he's talking about. But Ted's right. The more you make, the more you got to pay. That's how bankruptcy works. Right now, Mary's income probably isn't going to go up. Joe would like to find a better job. So if his income goes up while he's bankrupt, then the payment goes up. That's how it works, right?
That's exactly right.
It's reevaluated every month. So the bankruptcy doesn't sound like a great idea, because based on their current situation, it could cost, let's say, $750 a month. And again, we're giving round numbers. When you come in to see us, we do the exact math for your situation. And they'd be bankrupt for 21 months. And he might have to pay more than that as time goes on. Plus, he'd lose his tax refund and any other assets he might have. So the bankruptcy doesn't sound like a great option.
Well, and don't forget, you said based on their living expenses, they've got $500 a month to pay. And we just said the bankruptcy is going to be $750.
So there's a
it
big
doesn't
problem
solve the
right
problem
there.
anyway.
Yeah, they can't afford to go bankrupt. That's really what happens.
And that's got to drive you nuts, folks.
So, okay, a proposal then, is it possible to do the proposal for less than $750 a month?
Yes. So the proposal, there are two conditions. You need to offer your creditors more money than they get in a bankruptcy, and currently you need to offer them about a third of what you owe. So it's one or the other. Well, we just said a bankruptcy is somewhere around $15,000. They owe $60,000. A third of $60,000 is $20,000. So it's more than the 15. And the question now is, can we make it into a manageable payment? Well, proposals, you're allowed to pay over 5 years. So $20,000 is something like $333 a month.
So, and I mean, if they can afford $500, then I guess they can do it in 40 months instead of 5 years.
That's exactly right.
They can get it paid off quicker. So the whole concept then in a consumer proposal is you take what I would have had to pay in bankruptcy, offer a little bit more because we need the creditors to say yes to it.
Yep.
But I can stretch those payments out over a longer period of time than what would happen in a bankruptcy.
That's exactly right. And there are two bigger benefits. So the first is completely emotional. You're going to feel better about paying back part of your debt. So you can honestly say, if anybody ever asks you, have you filed bankruptcy? The answer is no, you didn't. You filed a proposal and you paid back what you could afford to repay. And the second benefit simply is, if your situation improves in the bankruptcy, you're actually penalized. In the proposal, it's locked in. So once your creditors and you have agreed to a payment plan, that's what you owe. If you pay it off quicker, that's great. You're done with the solution quicker. If your situation improves, if you get a better paying job, you inherit some money, you win the lottery, you're not required to pay this thing off any quicker than what you've agreed to, so you can actually start improving your life.
And how long does this all take? So I'm listening to this show right now and I think, oh boy, yeah, I got to do this. So I get on the internet, I go to Hoyes.com, I contact Ted or one of your people. And how quickly does it take before a proposal's up and running?
Yeah, so somebody who's got all the information that we need to prepare the legal documents, and we're not talking about complicated stuff here, you could see me in the morning, and if you had all your ducks in a row, I could file a proposal for you in the afternoon. Realistically, it takes a couple of days.
So 2-3 days. And the kind of information you're looking for is what? Your name, your address, who you owe money
That's right.
to.
Copies of your bills, that sort of stuff. I mean, it's all stuff that you probably have at your fingertips. Now, you may not have opened the envelopes because you're afraid of what they say, but you probably have all the information we need at your house.
So let's say I'm listening to this on the weekend. I phone your office on Monday. I come in to see you on Tuesday, give you all the information. I come back on Friday to sign the paperwork. When do I have to start paying you, and when do I know that this is all good?
Yeah. So the proposal, as soon as you file it, you stop making payments towards the debts. So you stop making the credit card payment, the line of credit, the loans, all of that sort of stuff. They get 45 days to figure out whether or not they like your deal. And so during that 45 days, you're not dealing with the credit cards anymore. You're not dealing with the lines of credit. You're not dealing with the loans. In most cases, you'll be required to make your first payment into the proposal in the first 30 days. And the reason you're doing that, it's a goodwill gesture. You're trying to demonstrate that, yes, I can afford to make this payment. Look, I want this thing to work.
So in Joe and Mary's case, where they're paying $500 or $600 in interest right now a month, but really their payments are $1,500 a month because they've got to make more than because that's what the deal is. You got to make the minimums. They would instantly start a proposal where they're paying maybe $350, $400, $500 a month right on day one. So they're better off right on day one. And then, generally speaking, 45 days later, it's all official. That's how it works.
That's exactly right. Yep.
And so there's no massive upfront fees or anything like that?
In fact, if somebody's asking them for significant upfront fees, then they're probably not dealing with a licensed trustee. They're dealing with something called a debt consultant, and you don't want to get me going on these guys because it's a whole other program.
Well, we'll have to make a note for that. So just to be very clear here, before I sign the paperwork with you to do a consumer proposal, how much money do I have to give you?
You shouldn't have to give me anything.
Zero. Okay. So there is no upfront fee until the process starts, until it's filed with the government. It's legally binding.
That's right. And that's the way the law is written. So, I mean...
So this isn't just you being a nice guy.
No.
It's illegal, or it's not allowed.
Any trustee you talk to, the first thing you should say is, do you need any money up front? And if they ask you for money up front, go talk to another trustee.
Because they're not doing it right. The rule is whatever money you pay has to go into the process. There can't be any charge up front for
You're looking for a solution for your debts here. You're not looking for somebody to take advantage of you and hit you with a bunch of legal fees.
So what downsides are we missing here? Is this going to totally toast my credit? Is this going to make me so I can't get a job? Like, what are we missing here?
Yeah, let's talk about the credit report, because this is one of those bugaboos that people have in their mind, that it's critically important that their credit report look great. And you know what? It is important that you have good credit. But frankly, in this couple's case, they already owe $60,000. No one is going to approve them for any new credit. So even though they're making all the minimum payments and their credit report looks good, the fact is they don't have good credit because no one's going to approve them for anything new. By dealing with your debt, you'll get over the hump. There'll be a period of time when you don't have access to credit, but that's a good thing, frankly. You need to learn to live within your means, to live with the money that you've got coming in and not rely on credit. And then once you've dealt with the debt, your credit will reestablish itself very quickly.
So your credit's already shot. That's why
right.
You're talking to us. It can't be any worse than what it already is. But by dealing with the debt, you actually clean it up. That's what you're talking about.
That's right. You'll make your credit better.
And there's no other hidden things we haven't thought of. You're not going to get fired from your job. You're not going to get evicted from your house. In fact, if you actually owned a house and had a mortgage and it was up to date, you could just keep on paying it.
Yeah, a lot of people are worried, well, so if I do one of these things, do I lose my car? Do I lose my house? A proposal's designed to deal with your unsecured debts. Things like your credit cards, maybe your income tax bill, your line of credit, your outstanding loan, even payday loans. It doesn't deal with things like your car lease or your car loan or your mortgage. As long as you make your payments on those secured debts, you get to keep the things that you're paying for, and that just makes sense.
Yep, sounds like a perfect arrangement. Well, there you go. So if you've got a massive amount of debt that you can't service on your own, A great way to clean up your debt mess is by filing a consumer proposal. We've got lots of information on that over at hoyes.com. That's HOYES.com. Thanks for being here, Ted. I'll be back to wrap it up right after this. You're listening to Debt Free in 30.
You're listening to Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Welcome back. It's time for the 30-second recap of what we discussed today. My first guest today was Gail Vaz-Oxlade, who gave us a very concise strategy for cleaning up a debt mess. She said you should make a list of your debts, order your debts from highest interest rates to lowest, make your minimum payments on all of your debts, but pay extra on your highest interest rate callable debt, things like credit cards, payday loans, and lines of credit. Get rid of the callable debt first because the bank can call that loan at any time, which can ruin your credit or jack up the interest rate. It's hard work, you need a plan, but it can work. In our second segment, Ted Michalos explained how, if you have a huge amount of debt and can't pay it in full, a consumer proposal may be the best option for cleaning up a debt mess. That's the 30-second recap of what we discussed today. So, what's my take on cleaning up a debt mess? I think it's obvious from what our two guests said today that the first step is to figure out where you're at. How much debt do you have, and what will it take to pay it off? It's always best to clean up your debt mess on your own, so if you can cut your expenses and increase your income to free up cash, that's the best way to go. If you can get everything paid off in a year or two, do it. Pick up a copy of Gail's Debt Free Forever book and follow her detailed instructions. If you have more debt than you can pay off in 2 or 3 years, or longer, it's time to consider a more permanent solution, and that's where a consumer proposal comes into play. That's our show for today. This show is on the radio every week and also available on our website and on iTunes, so please go to hoyes.com for a full list of participating radio stations and details on how you can download the show to listen to on your iPod or smartphone. Full show notes are available on our website, and I'd love to hear your comments, which you can leave right on our website at hoyes.com. That's HOYES.com. Thanks for listening. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.